Hello friends, new and old. I'm Shannon Meeks, historical creator by day, performer and athlete by night. And this week, I'm tackling a project that was supposed to be made last Christmas. It started when I found this lovely fabric, which I think used to be a tablecloth or bed sheet, at a recycling center, and it instantly caught my eye because I had just purchased this 1940s dress and blouse pattern, and the fabric was virtually identical to the illustration. Not that red with white polka dots is exactly a revolutionary design, but these were of the perfect scale and ratio, and so I snatched the fabric up and then purchased some dark green jersey twill to match the jumper dress, figuring it'd make a super cute Christmas outfit. But then life got in the way. I got distracted with historically inspired cookies, wishbone pincushions, and other whimsical and ridiculous Victorian Christmas traditions, and the dress plans fell by the wayside. But not this year. This will be the year I complete the dress. Hopefully. Because if you pay attention to my community tab, you'll know that I broke my foot a few weeks back, and so making videos and everything that goes with it, from working a sewing machine pedal to moving a tripod around, has become much more of a task than usual. Don't worry, I'm not in pain. I'm in high spirits and occupying my time with various projects. It just means that we might have a few less camera angles than usual, so please bear with me. Without further ado, let's get started. If you want to see exactly how far I got into this project last year, please enjoy this footage of me assembling the pattern. Fast forward 360 some days, and here's what we've got. A mess of crinkled pattern pieces that needs to be flattened and cut out. And yes, I'm doing this entire project at work, so please enjoy the occasional background cameo by my coworkers. This pattern comes with suggested cutting layouts for different widths of fabric, and while traditionally I completely disregard these in favor of the time-tested technique of winging it, I just didn't have the energy to go several rounds of pattern piece Tetris, so I actually followed the suggested layout for my width and was pleased at the results. And so, several minutes later, I had my pieces all cut out, like a little Christmas puzzle waiting to be assembled. But first, I had to go through and mark out some of the pleat lines that I skipped earlier, which I did by simply cutting through the paper pattern and marking the lines beneath with chalk. The first step was to join the center seam of the lower front section, which was as straightforward as you can get, although this jersey twill does love to stretch, so you'll see me using a copious amount of pins through the whole project to keep it from acting up. Then it was off to the machine, but first things first, I decided to do a test drive, quite literally, on some scraps, to make sure that my left foot was up to the task. I have some vivid memories of trying to use my left foot on a brake pedal as a teenager, and so I was actually quite tentative at first, but apparently my hand-foot coordination has improved over the years, and the test stitch went off without a hitch, which meant the rest of the project could in fact continue. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't considered asking Phil to work the pedal as a plan B, but I think we're all glad it didn't come to that. With the first seam laid down and pressed, it was time to consult the instructions, which, in true period fashion, told me to simply make pleat and stitch on lines indicated. There were, of course, multiple pleat lines, so it took a second to verify which pleats they meant, in this case the centermost ones, so following my chalk lines, I folded the fabric in towards the center line and pinned them down, making sure that the pleats met nice and snugly on that center seam, and that the two layers on the top edge of the V were properly aligned. And voila, this is what it should look like, more or less. The next instruction is to sew the lower front to the side front section, and here is where the numbered seams help add clarity to the instructions. The seams are, theoretically at least, numbered in the order in which they are to be sewn, which means that next I should be stitching along this line to connect the lower pleated front to the side front. So that piece was located and pinned down to the pleated lower front, and in the end it should look something like this, although I'd recommend skipping the triangular hole, it didn't add anything. You'll end up with the side fronts sandwiching the lower front and that center pleat in the very middle. This can be stitched down, although if you're also trying to film the process, I'd recommend waiting until after the musical interlude downstairs, as that only adds interference. The seams were then pressed, first on a low heat, and then later and under the protection of a press cloth, blasted within an inch of their lives with hot steam for those nice crisp seams. Next, we're instructed to turn under the seam allowances at the lower edge of the upper front and sew them to the side front sections. So here is the upper dress front, here is the lower edge, and I like to mark out my seam allowances so that they're easy to fold under. Then, let's give them an iron. Now the edges are all nice and clean and the piece is ready to be inserted into its slot. Like this. It's going to be a lapped seam, where the edge is turned under and overlapped onto the piece below by the amount of the seam allowance, in this case ½ an inch, and then top stitched down. So you can see that I've marked out the seam allowance of the bottom piece, and then I can just align the top piece and it's super easy to pin down. I just made sure that the point of the upper portion was aligned with the center seam of the pleats. And here's what it looks like afterwards. Next up is forming the second set of pleats on the side front sections, like so. And here's where I ran into a bit of confusion and read ahead in the instructions to see if that would clear things up. It didn't really. The following step says to stitch the side pleats to position as indicated, but says nothing about how to attach the two torso pieces, which logically seem to be with another lapped seam, but that created bulky neck corners, so maybe there's a step I'm missing. I once again marked out my seam lines on all pieces, and instead of basting the seam allowance under like the instructions recommend, I just ironed them down, and that worked quite well to hold them in place until I could stitch them down. The nature of the lapped seam, however, means that the alignment notches become hidden just as you're about to need them, and with this fabric being so stretchy, I really needed that extra bit of alignment help, so I added a few pins to mark where the notches were, and this helped me keep the tension correct when pinning the two curved pieces together. As I worked on this dress, surrounded by red and green and Christmas baubles, the faint sounds of our Christmas number wafting up from the theater downstairs, I reflected on my holiday traditions. And because I always enjoy hearing others' traditions, let me share one of mine with you. And if you'd like to skip this portion, I've put in chapter markers for just this reason. So one of our traditional holiday cookie recipes is for cutout cookies, accompanied by the most delicious egg white based frosting that hardens into the most amazing texture, almost like marshmallows, except then it crumbles a little bit in your mouth. But the problem is that this particular frosting recipe also dries fast. Incredibly fast. I'm talking maybe 15 to 20 minutes of working time to decorate almost 50 cookies, and past that, the decorations just won't stick anymore. They'll simply bounce off the frosting. And within my family, we'd gotten used to this. My dad was the chief froster. He'd apply the frosting, and then my mom and I would decorate as fast as we could. And of course, every year you'd start with big ambitions to make gorgeous works of edible art with cute little details, and by the end of the session, you'd just be scooping up all the leftover decorations from previous cookies into one big pile and then smashing the last cookies into it, frosting side down, in order to force the decorations to stick. So then, as I got older, I started inviting groups of friends to come over and join in the cookie decorating event. And every year we'd have to explain to my friends that, no, you see, you actually have to decorate really fast or the frosting will dry up. And every year it was just complete chaos because, of course, everyone frosts in different styles and at different speeds, and there were certainly some unique creations, but in the end everyone had fun and got to take a big plate of cookies home at the end of the day. What about you? Let me know how you like to celebrate these cold, dark days of winter. Or if you're lucky enough to be in the southern hemisphere, let me know how you'll be spending the next days. Hopefully, it's drinking white wine in the sun. Back at the theater, and we're still pinning the front panel to the side front. A bit of finagling and several dozen pins later, this is what it looked like, and you can see the two layers are attached all the way down the seam and extending into the second set of pleats. These were then sewn down carefully, since these stitches are very visible, and you can see me here fussing with the layers of the pleats to make sure I'm not tacking anything down that's supposed to remain free. After the approximately 3 trillion pins are removed, this is where we're at, and it's starting to look quite nice. Moving on from the front, the next steps are to sew all the remaining seams, and again, the number seams come in handy, and so we'll start with seam number 6, joining the back to the side back. I imagine if you're working with a non-stretch fabric, this would be done in a heartbeat. You could almost zip through it with no pinning at all, but I'm going to play it safe and pin my little heart out. This is more or less what it should look like when it's all done, and then it's time to sew it up. You know the drill. Sew your seams, then press them. If your fabric is finicky, like mine, then use a press cloth if you're feeling extra responsible. Once the back panel is now one piece instead of 3, it's time to join the front to the back, starting first with the shoulder seams and then with the side seams. Be sure not to get carried away and pin the left side opening closed so that you can eventually insert a zipper or some hooks. Then it's back to the machine to fine-tune our left foot's coordination skills and to discover this gem of a situation where someone has clearly wound the bobbin with 2 different colored threads, simply tying them together and carrying on with the day as if that wasn't the strangest thing ever. What goes in must go out, and then it's time for a test fit. The dress looked a bit large, and the fabric was so stretchy that I decided to try it on with the zipper hole pinned closed to see if I could slip it on over my head and save myself the trouble of inserting proper closures. They say your sewing project isn't done until you bleed on it, and I needed to get this project done before Christmas, so I made sure to stab myself several times on those pins just for good measure. It turns out that not only was the zipper unnecessary, but this dress was also a bit large in the torso for my taste. Perhaps because it was meant to be a jumper dress and therefore not too tightly fitted, but I prefer it to be a more form-fitting dress, so I decided to take it in a little bit in the torso. A second fitting was required before my modifications could be set in thread, and just in case my blood sacrifice from before went unnoticed by the sewing gods, this fit was much better, and I could sew up the hole for good, which I was about to do on the faff when I noticed that somebody had installed black thread in the serger where yesterday there had been bright purple, and I needed no further invitation. All of the major seams were finished off in this method, in full pedal-to-the-metal mode, only pausing for a set from Eurythmics. Then it was back to it, finishing off the sleeves, and then in a departure from period instructions, I also serged the hemline to eliminate some bulk in the bottom edge. The hemline was tackled next, and I used one of my favorite techniques for curved hems, which is using a stiff piece of paper or thin cardboard cut to the radius of your hem to help encourage the fabric to fold over neatly on itself. Each section of hem was ironed, then left to cool under the weight of a sleeve board before moving on to the next section. The hems were ironed and pinned in place, and then taken home to be hand-stitched, partly because this worked better with my schedule, and partly because look at how much prettier this setting is. Then it's back to our ever-fluorescent backstage to finish off the hemline of the dress, which is done with a facing. This consists of 2 shapes and 3 pieces, which are all pinned together, and I should note that it's very important to line up the notches at this step. It's going to look like they're misaligned, and it's going to be tempting to ignore them and align the edges of the pieces instead, but if you look at the original pattern piece, it might be clearer to see that they are cut this way on purpose, and that the 2 pieces do align, if you match up the notches, just not at the top edge, but a ½ inch in at the seam line. Once you sew them together, and then of course press them, you'll see that the edges meet up perfectly, and you can just trim off those little overhanging corners. I then chose to serge the bottom edge of my facing rather than turning it under, and let's take a sec to admire how clean it looks when it's all pressed and serged. Then it can be pinned onto the neckline, right sides together, matching up the seams and notches. And here it is, looking remarkably similar to the illustration, minus those serged edges, but I'm okay with sacrificing period authenticity for the sake of time. The facing was stitched on, the seams were turned right side out and pressed again, before being pinned under to keep the edges nice and clean. And the only part I had a bit of trouble with were the 2 corners, where there were many layers of fabric, and so the corner itself was not quite as sharp as I'd like. Partly because of this, and partly because I just thought it'd be cleaner all around, I decided to top stitch the neckline. The instructions want the armholes to be finished with bias underlining, and I did seriously consider it, but again, time was not on my side, so I just serged the edges, then laid in a line of stitching just inside the seam allowance, which allowed me to super easily and quickly fold under the edge at the right spot. Then the armholes could be stitched down, officially finishing the jumper portion of the dress. At which point I decided we needed to do a spin test, which seemed problematic at first, but fortunately Phil also has a creative, problem-solving brain and he came up with the perfect solution. This is not a full circle skirt, and some of the dress's volume is trapped in the pleats, so it maybe wasn't the best candidate for a spin test, but hopefully it was entertaining. Also, please enjoy watching me realize that I spun the wrong way and got mildly dizzy. Not that that affects my throwing arm at all. Back to the task at hand. With the dress done, I started on the blouse, but unless you're very new to this channel, you've just seen me sew a blouse and a half, and this video is already quite long, so let's forego the footage so we can get to the final reveal before jolly old Saint Nick arrives. Before we take a look at the finished outfit, I'd like to take a sec to wish everybody a calm, relaxing, and safe holiday season. Regardless of which holiday, if any, you'll be celebrating, may your stitches all be straight, your needles all be sharp, and your mock-ups fit on the first try. If you found this video helpful, let me know below, or just send some holiday cheer my way. If you'd like to support my work, my Ko-fi account is linked in the description, and if you aren't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? And now, if you'll allow me to trespass on your time a little longer, I'd like to give a few of my thoughts on the pattern. I'd say that this pattern is a fairly quick make. Even with the filming, I managed to get the dress done in 3 days. The blouse only took another couple days of very relaxed sewing. I'm super pleased with the color combination, particularly considering that I'd like to use it for the holiday season, and I really love the cut and lines of the outfit, especially the dress, because I'm partial to V-necks. I like the way they look on me, and this dress has not only those angles on the neckline, but they're echoed in the waistline as well. The pleats are also super cute. They read very nicely as 1940s, and they add some good volume and depth to the skirt. As we learned, this is maybe not the swishiest of dresses, but I feel it's pretty typical of the period, when fabric was at a premium due to war shortages, and it's still got some nice movement. I don't wear that much red, and definitely not any polka dots, so I was worried that the blouse might be a bit much. But it's really not, especially because a lot of it is covered by the jumper, and I think it helps jazz up the solid green of the dress. I would definitely recommend this dress for anyone looking to add a vintage or history-bounding touch to their wardrobe, and while I think it could certainly be tackled by an adventurous beginner, I'd recommend a mock-up to make sure you understand the instructions and seam finishes before starting in on the real fabric. If you'd like some more cozy sewing content, this time with a literary twist, I'd highly recommend my Lord of the Rings robe.